Gentlemen, I think I would like us to make progress if we can, please. Except I can't make any progress until your colleagues return. So.
Slight queue for the bathroom, I think.
Just in preparation, can I just say that I have got a list of potential speakers, which is quite long. But I'm going to take them in the order that I've been given, which means that Councillor Pearce, you will start in a moment from this is interested parties now that we've got this particular stage. And I shall call Councillor Pearce, followed by Councillor McLean, followed by Councillor Southgate and Mr. Sean Cunliffe. Now, but we will not make that progress for another moment or two and until the barrister is back. Microphone, please.
I've had to leave. I'm not on the list to speak, but may I speak as a resident to replace the several that have had to leave? I have put in an objection, so I've got documents in the folder.
It isn't normally the process that we operate, and I'm conscious that a number of people have left. But in this case, I think I would not be unhappy if you were to make a very brief,
be extremely brief
comment, having made an objection yourself. That'll be fine.
Thank you.
So we're all back, I think. So, Councillor Pearce, your observations, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will try and be as quick as I can. I would like to focus on protection of children from harm and crime and disorder. Now, I was quite worried, but I've spoken to people outside before, since the events, about all the, especially the nitrogen oxide. But I was a bit worried again by Mr. Dudley's slightly relaxed attitude, because I think we should have a complete, how can I put it? Oh dear, a complete no-no about drugs. Now, there is, I understand it, what goes on inside and how they get in there, get into the event. But I'm much more concerned about what's going on outside. The police, unfortunately, are telling us that with the same amount of police, they will struggle to look after this. The police have good communication, but I don't think they're quite as good as the drug dealers, because the drug dealers seem to be able to talk to each other almost instantly and warn the person who is selling that security is coming. And all this last year happened in the rest of the park because youngsters under 18, and we do have a duty of care, sometimes up to in their 20s, counsellors have a duty of care to young people to safeguard their interests and their health, etc. And it seems to me, with these things going on, and the amount of nitrous oxide tubes that were found in school playgrounds, in the streets, down Central Road, all around the whole area, this couldn't have come from one or two drug dealers. This had to come from a whole raft of people selling these. There were hundreds, if not thousands of them. And that when you're outside the area of the festival, it's mostly younger people. Now, I don't know how the police operate, but I don't think drug dealers ask people who are buying nitrous oxide, even though it's a legal high, but it's illegal to sell it to under 16s as far as I understand it. But drug dealers don't ask to see their birth certificate, they just ask to see their money. And I am seriously concerned about the amount of that goes on, because these type of festivals in a built-up area like ours attract these sorts of people selling drugs, and I am seriously worried about it. The other thing was about disorder. Now, if they have 23,500 for a Saturday granted, if the crowd is only 75% of that, that goes down to 17,000 like we had before. And if 75% of them leave before the stipulated end of the concert, we still have over 4,000 people all leaving at the end. And I don't think that is a safe number to come out onto one street, the London Road, going into Morden. That is clearly going to be a number that the local security and the local police probably can't handle safely. And if you're saying about taxi ranks and buses, 4,000 would swamp that. The queue for taxi would be all around the park. We have a serious issue there, like the lady said, who had all that problems outside their garden in Epsom Road. Where the if only out of 4,000, for instance, only 5% are looking for a bit more mischief, that's hundreds of people. And we have to guard against that, and I'm seriously worried about that. But as far as the drugs are concerned, if the police can't deal with it because they're short-staffed or they're not being paid, and the security don't deal with it, there's only one group who can deal with it, and that's the councillors. And the only way we can deal with it is not allowing the festival to take place in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. I'm going to call on Councillor McLean, but can I just remind everybody that we have had the opportunity to read your submissions, so comments need to be, at this stage of the evening, quite brief, if I may say so. But Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by saying that opposing this application or at the festival or a festival doesn't sit well with me. I appreciate the cultural benefits. We need to use our green spaces, and of course it generates revenue for the council. However, it would appear to me there are two questions in front of us today. Is this the right type of festival for the area? And also, is the management team capable or competent in delivering a successful campaign festival? If I can take the first one, and I would like to use the applicant's earlier representation. With regard to being the right type of festival, we've heard about the level of antisocial behaviour that happened outside the event. Therefore, this event is attracting individuals that are partaking in behaviour that is just simply not suitable for a residential area. With regard to the management, we also heard earlier, in answer to Councillor Kohler's question with regard to capacity, we were told that it's not an issue about numbers, because in Clapham Common they don't have the antisocial behaviour issues or management issues. So therefore, one would suggest that it's the management of this festival. I also think it's quite important to highlight that I did attend the November the 22nd public meeting. I was disappointed, as was a number of residents, that the applicant did not attend that meeting, and as a result it showed a level of insincerity. I would also like to now draw attention back to the original application, 3 days, 5 years, and an increased capacity. That, of course, has now been reduced. It was an over-ambitious application to start with. However, it would now appear that the application that's before the committee is seeking to be rewarded for failure. Before, the management of the festival last year was a failure. I would now like to I appreciate the committee needs to address the 4 licensing principles, and I would like to focus on the prevention of crime and disorder. Under Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, the London Borough of Merton, as a local authority, has a duty to do all that it reasonably can to prevent crime and disorder within the borough. Attracting thousands of people to a residential area, a location that is unsuitable for this type of festival, where alcohol and drugs are freely taken, encourages criminality and antisocial behaviour, rather than preventing crime and disorder, which is in direct contravention of this policy objective. I would now like also to move on to the protection of children from harm, to build on what Councillor Pearce has already said. Protecting children from harm is an extremely important objective because of their vulnerability and susceptibility to be attracted to adult behaviour, in particular alcohol and drug use. It is widely acknowledged that the use of nitrous oxide is a great gateway drug to more serious and addictive drug use. The blatant use of nitrous oxide at the festival, with many people inhaling from balloons and the chucking of capsules all around the area, is not something that the borough's children should witness for fear of drug use being normalised. In summary, I would like to go to the point I made earlier. This application simply seeks to be rewarded for failure. It is not the right type of festival for a residential area, and I am not convinced of the sincerity or indeed the competence of the management team.
Thank you. Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here on behalf of the liaison group of the Ahmadiyya Mosque. I know I'm not representing the views of the Ahmadiyya themselves, which, as you probably know, like good observant Muslims, don't allow smoking, don't allow drinking, and abhor profane language. No, the liaison group, in fact, is a group of residents in the immediate area of the mosque, other stakeholders, and they asked me to convey their views. I think listening to this, it's quite apparent that the business model underlying the event, we have the fair, is one that relies upon momentum. And if we look at the original application for a permanent license over 3 days, numbers growing by 50% over the next few years to a total of nearly 30,000, it's very evident that the money comes at the margin. So you've got very high fixed costs, but as you can sell more and more tickets, so I would suggest the last few thousand of those are almost pure profit. Now we've reined that back to a 2-year license, and even so, we still have numbers growing by 35% over the next 2 years. But the suggestion is that by coming back to roughly where we were last year, that is somehow acceptable, as Councillor McLean has said, that that is tacitly a reward for the failures of last year. You have to consider that whether the various conditions that it's been suggested you should put upon the award of the licence are sufficient. Can you actually sufficiently hedge around the threat of harm by controlling the depth of the swimming pool? And there are 2 aspects in which I would suggest it's very difficult for the organisers to exercise control. One is the risk of crime and disorder. In parallel to the momentum-driven market represented by the event itself, I was suspect have a momentum-driven market in drug supply that, looking at the figures, they're small numbers, but the number of offences more than doubles between 2017 and 2018. More disturbingly, reports for possession of drugs with intent to supply appear in 2018. And not only would one expect an event of this magnitude to come to the notice of drug dealers, but indeed it has been suggested to me by a police officer that the real danger is that other gangs move in to supply that. So it's not just our local gangs, but others may be wanting to muscle in on the territory. And that does pose a risk. The other aspect, I think it's been dealt with in a way, exposure of children to harm, lyrics that are homophobic, misogynist, and so on. Now, we've been told that acts can be pulled, but as with all these measures, I'm not sure you have sufficient control in advance to know what various artists are going to include in their acts. So I think that remains a risk. And of course, different from last year, we do have our new leisure centre, Cheek by Jowl, with the site for the festival. So it's a weekend. It's really family time for use of the leisure centre, and I do. It's just an uncomfortable conjunction to have the leisure centre fully attended on a sunny August weekend together with the festival goers. So really, your task is to decide whether you are satisfied that the myriad of conditions we seem to be proposing can make this an acceptable event, and what risks lie outside that, in particular in the area of crime. And we have been told by the inspector that policing this depends on withdrawing forces from other work, other parts of the borough, which is not a happy situation, because it. So my concern is that whatever you do, there remain elements of this that are disturbing and unacceptable.
Would you like to just say a few words?
I'm grateful for the applicants because they've actually addressed the points in my representation. But I just want to pick on some words that Councillor Monday made and the Environmental Health Officer regarding the noise complaints, and I forgot to mention it earlier on. The vast majority of those complaints actually came into the council. It wasn't into the applicant. And I recognise that they've already spoken about what they're going to do regarding their hotline and sufficiently staff it, which I suggest they didn't do last year. Just to let you know that those complaints come into the emergency out of hours number for the council. That number is Mascot Telecare, which is there as an early warning alarm system for our most vulnerable in the community. They're not there to handle your complaints. So if you are minded to give this application, I'd ask you to endorse the point 3 on page 10 from the Environmental Health Officer, and just ask that the applicants liaise more closely with me as the Head of Customer Services regarding how they provide that hotline and their provisions to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, what I'm going to do is to stop there for the moment and ask the applicant if you have any questions of the interested parties who've spoken thus far. Thank you. Do any of the responsible authorities have any questions? No. In that case, we'll move straight on. And is Karen Alessi, Alexandrovsky here? No? Okay. Debbie Arnold? Elodie Barnbrook? Sally and Stephen Bartlett? Kim Birch?
Come on. Hello, Councillor. My objection was to the event. More was that there was sighting of women openly urinating in the green area just at the bottom of where I live at Sheldon Drive. And particularly a man who was also with them was urinating as well. And this was about 10 o'clock in the morning. The problem with that is that children walk with their parents, their families and their pets. And also, in a way, that's exposure. That's actually an offence. A young child seeing that could be easily affected. Also, additionally, I found that as I was, when I was actually on the way back from the event, there was obviously hundreds of canisters everywhere, and there was fly tipping from bottles, from drinks, everything, all the way down to Lynx Avenue when I walked that way. So it wasn't a case of people picking up bottles and putting them in appropriate places. They were just left and discarded along the road. Also, I think the other thing as well is with regards to music, I'm not unaccustomed to going to concerts, and I understand about the sound levels, but often they're contained within, say, like the O2 or whatever. You can choose to wear acoustic headphones or rather earpieces if you don't want the bass to come out. And also I'm aware that children or young teens buy albums which often have parental guidance on them. So in other words, it's explicit, it might be talking about sexual things and that, but it's down to them to know that, and the parents have the right to either take the CD away or not. In the event that happened in Morden Park, there was no choice. That choice was taken away from us. We had explicit words. There was, I mean, we could hear the MC all the way down where we were at Sheldon Drive, and literally the noise was just so unbearable, and the expletives and the words coming out, well, I thought, well, I'm glad I don't live that far up if I've got children. We shouldn't, as residents, have to close our windows on a hot day. We shouldn't be bound by what the organisers want to do. We have a right to have our homes in the summer, sit out, enjoy our barbecues. And on that weekend, literally, we had to sit with all our windows, one of the hottest days of the year, closed. And then this is just my final thing. Obviously, with regards to the noise, it was such bad on the Sunday evening that I actually rang the phone number. And I just said to them, this was 9:15, and that the music level just went up. The bass went up, everything went up. And I spoke to a lady and she said, oh, we'll be finishing in about 20 minutes. 9:45, it was still going. 10 o'clock, the bass was still high. That's, so where was the action from that? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that. I don't think there'll be any question at this moment in time. So I'm going to move on. Martin Bishop-Apsey. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Brick. No. Sarah Brown. Gordon and Karen Bunting. These are all people who indicated they might want to speak, I think. Ron Camilleri. Susan Camilleri. No. Elspeth Clark. Elspeth Clark, there we are.
Mine is brief, you'll be pleased to know. I'm Elspeth Clark. I'm here this evening wearing 3 hats. I'm a local resident living opposite Morden Park and Playing Fields. I'm an ex-chair of Morden Park and Playing Fields Association, aka Friends of Morden Park, and I'm currently Vice-Chair of Governors at a local primary school where I am Link Governor for Children's Safeguarding. So, 3 hats. Think of me as a kind of Venn diagram. When I first saw and heard what Eastern Electrics was asking for, I thought, they're asking for the moon and will then draw back, agree to drop or reduce some elements so we, the local residents, will think they are bowing to pressure. This is a well-known tactic used by trade unions for decades. Call it negotiating skills 101. Well, I'm sorry, but this local resident Venn diagram isn't that gullible. I don't believe that your measures will solve the problems of antisocial and criminal behaviour. You would have to provide hundreds more stewards, let alone toilets along the routes to the venue, to do that. Last year, the MJMK application was turned down because licensing did not have confidence that the measures they would put in place would be adequate. That remains my belief here. The MJMK application was also turned down with the comment that the Morden Park site is very close to a large number of residential properties and the area is almost exclusively residential. That has not changed. I do realise better than some the very difficult financial situation faced by the council, but selling one's birthright for a mess of pottage is not the answer. Eastern Electrics have already had 2 bites of the cherry. I do not believe they deserve a third.
Gillian Clark?
No, I withdrew.
Withdrew. Okay, thank you. Crystal Collier? Andrew Collini? Matt Davis? Keith Davis? Suzanne Denny? Right.
I'll keep it brief too. I'm not going to repeat anything that I've already said in my 2 statements, but just in response to what I've heard this evening, firstly, if the organisers don't understand why difficulties arose in 2018, which they did say this evening, how can they possibly address them in 2019? Secondly, the police have said they don't have the numbers to assist the applicant's security. And we have also heard this evening that the applicant's own stewards don't have the powers of the police. So I'm not quite sure how they are going to control the crowd. And my last comment is that the applicant's barrister said there will always be nuisance. Well, I don't want that nuisance. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Diane Desombre. Maggie Doughty, Fiona Doyle, Dave Dwyer, Natalie Elluck, Ruhi Farouk, Ken Franklin, Imran Hamid.
I'd just like to make a short statement and then like to pass it over to my wife who'd like to make a longer statement. Firstly, I'm appalled that the police, the Environment Agency and the applicants are discussing drugs. Taking drugs is illegal, selling drugs is illegal, and we're here discussing amnesties. The way to stop this is to reject this application. This is a residential area. Full stop. There should be no discussion about that. Thank you. Sorry.
May I
That's my
also
wife.
add, I'm Mrs. Hamid.
So join.
I'll try to be very, very, very short. I just would like to say, draw attention to the London Borough Motor Licensing Policy, which says the rights of residents to enjoy their homes and locality without being unreasonably disturbed is priority. We'll have better opportunities to enjoy the leisure time safely without fear of violence, intimidation or disorder. Another intention of the policy is to ensure that local residents are not unreasonably disturbed, whether in the street or at home, by activities within licensed premises or by customers arriving at or leaving licensed premises. One of the policy strategies also says the prevention of alcohol-related crime and antisocial behaviour and the protection of public safety all contribute to the building of strong licensing policy, enabling individuals to feel safe and engage fully with local activities, inclusive community cohesion across the borough. Protecting children from alcohol-related harm is vital. Now, Morden Park, I don't know how well you know Morden Park, is surrounded by residential houses. In the centre of it, there is a gym, there is a paddling pool, there is also playground, and there is a very new leisure centre. On a very hot, busy day, well, very hot, sunny day, you'll have parents with their children enjoying those facilities. I cannot envisage how are these people or how are these youngsters supposed to mingle with all these partygoers that are taking illegal highs, are being drunken, disorderly, behaving, and so on. I just think that it completely fails on every single level. I also think if the organizers were to accommodate the noise levels, they would have reduced the time. I think it's unacceptable that they expect us, residents, to listen to the music so loud that even with windows closed, doors shut, you can still hear music with TV on for 10.5 hours on Saturday and Sunday. People do need to go to work on Sundays as well, on Sundays, on weekends, and especially on Monday. And it's not fair that we should be deprived of our sleep at least. Thank you very much.
Hanran, Kate Haywood, Claire Heath-White.
Most of what I was going to say has been said already, but I'd just like to make a few comments based on personal experience over the past couple of years. I live literally on the park, just over the fence from the park, and my husband is the rector of St Lawrence Church, which is one of the properties which is most affected by the festival. I think it is very true that the organisers haven't kept earlier promises, just one small one. After last year's disaster, we were told that we would have a meeting to consult and to see what could be done to improve in the future. We've never heard back from anybody from We Are the Fair, so it means that other assurances are taken slightly lightly. And all the things that were worked on last year actually, from 2017, actually got worse. We've said a lot about the noise. We phoned the helpline. Nobody came to monitor. If you've got 400 complaints and you can't possibly monitor all of that. I think the reason there were more complaints was that actually more people knew about it. I don't think 2017 was a success. People were unaware of what to do. We didn't get a letter to say how to complain. We live next door to the park. So I think the noise was worse, but also people didn't know who to say, how unhappy they were, how to say it. And a lot of the noise was heard in Worcester and Motspur Park, a long way away, and they were totally unaware of the festival happening, and their Saturday and Sunday were ruined, but weren't sure where the noise was coming from. Traffic, a lot was said about the improved transport scheme for last year. It led to traffic chaos on London Road. The church had a team of voluntary stewards over the entire weekend, so we saw it all. There were drunk festival goers who couldn't find their coaches. The Uber blackout, meaning they went to York Close. They hadn't a clue where that was. It meant that vulnerable women were left stranded by the side of the road, often drunk, being harassed, which I saw myself. Antisocial behaviour. The one place where it wasn't worse in 2018 was outside St Lawrence Church, because we had a rota of volunteers, some quite elderly, who manned our fence to prevent the appalling behaviour of the year before. And the positive experience of the care home, the letter that was referred to, was, I think, largely due to the fact that they're next door to us, and we made sure that people were not urinating behind their bins. We had to stop a few people there, rather than a better experience of the festival. It was... The stewards themselves had a lot of complaints about bad conditions. They left at 9:30 on the Sunday so they could get the train home, leaving us vulnerable and looking after our property on our own. Our little area was better. Problems just moved. They always will. And so unless We Are the Fair can guarantee, we had about 4 people on a very short stretch of fence. If they can't guarantee that kind of protection for the entire perimeter of the park, there will be problems, and actually people will just move back into the side roads to do their drug deals from there. And those who are thrown out of the queue, quite rightly for being drunk or having drugs, they will just end up on our streets to cause problems outside the festival. The toilets. We had a lot. The first year we had people pooing in the graveyard. That's one of the reasons why we had our team of stewards. There were toilets in the car park of the college, very close to where we were, but particularly coming out, the festival goers are drunk, high and tired. They do not care where or when they go. They just go. And they were not even bothered to walk a few metres to a public toilet. One woman did and came straight back and said she was going to urinate by the side of the road because the toilets were so disgusting. So I think in view of my experiences over the last couple of years, I think Morden is a residential area. Unlike Clapham Common, which has roads all around it, busy roads, Clapham Common, Morden Park is surrounded by houses almost immediately, quite quiet roads. And so all the noise, all the antisocial behaviour goes onto residential streets. Hatfield House, where it was before, is in the middle of nowhere. We used to live quite close to it. Very, very different context. So I think Morden is an inappropriate place for a festival such as this, and I would ask for it not to be granted a licence at all. Thank you.
David Heathwhite, I'm the minister at St Lawrence Church. It's a Grade 1 listed building adjacent to the park. It's home of a diverse and active church family gathered from across the local area. We've received no money from Eastern Electrics, just in case anyone's wondering. On the need to ensure public safety, the festival organisers have failed on every occasion to manage cars and buses safely. Last year, we witnessed an organiser putting "Man at Work" signs in the road. This was their organised policy to close a lane. And it led to the area outside St Lawrence effectively becoming a car and bus park for the next 2 hours. The lay-by was full, the bus stop was full, and one of the lanes of the road, in fact probably two of the lanes, were jammed with buses and cars. No one was taking care of pedestrian safety. There were no organisers around. The so-called Uber blackout meant that a number of confused people leaving the festival, inebriated, let's be honest, inebriated and confused people had no idea where they were supposed to be going. They'd ordered an Uber, but in their tired and emotional state, they were completely unable to work out where it was. The directions on their phone did actually point to where it was, but they couldn't understand what the phone was telling them at that time. Fortunately, there were some of us around to help them, point them in the right direction, but the plan to actually have two Uber areas will make this even more confusing. The situation is chaotic and dangerous to people's safety. On public nuisance and the sound levels, we've heard a lot about decibels. I think when it comes down to it, the issue is the nature of the sound and the noise. It goes on for hours, it's bass biased, and by the time it gets to you, it's muffled and distorted by travel. It doesn't stop. It goes on all afternoon, all evening. You can't do gardening. You can't have a party. You can't have a barbecue. It's a public nuisance. It's the very definition of public nuisance. Changing the thresholds by 5 decibels isn't going to make a difference. A litter. They've claimed that their cleaning companies are adequate to bag everything and sort it out. However, what happened outside St Lawrence last year was it was bagged and put in the historic trough next to the bus stop. I don't think that's the intention of the people who put that there as a memorial. So in conclusion, the need, I think, for so many added conditions and requirements that we've heard about this evening clearly demonstrate that this kind of event is not actually licensable. Were it a licensable event, you would not need half as many restrictions to it. The applicant's representative himself has stated that, and these are his words, with 17,000 people, quotes, there will always be nuisance, there will always be antisocial behaviour. How much more so with 23,500 or 27,000 people? The applicant has admitted that in 2018 all the requirements were met, and yet the nuisance, the crime and the lack of safety were clear to all of us. The police themselves accept that antisocial behaviour in 2018 was unacceptable. And what is their solution? Apparently, a few more high-vis jackets. They've basically admitted they are incapable of policing this event. The applicant has claimed this year that they have the answer. Are they capable of actually achieving that? What does the evidence suggest? The evidence is that they are not capable of achieving what they claim or plan. Must we, local residents, be the guinea pigs once again in what seems just to be an experiment?
Carla and Russell King. Mr. King.
Yes, thank you. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my wife. A lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, but basically in regard to what the barrister was saying earlier, that Eastern Electric didn't understand why 2018 went wrong. They couldn't really ascribe any particular thing to it. It just beggars belief that why would we even consider giving this to them again if they don't even understand what went wrong in 2018? How are they going to, irrespective of the amount of mitigations they might try and put in place for this year and next year if the licence is granted, how can they prove or even demonstrate that they're going to fix what went wrong last year and indeed try and mitigate anything the same or different that may go on this year or the year after, if it's granted? To say that you didn't understand what went wrong just demonstrates that they don't really understand what to do. And this is Malden, for goodness sake. This is not Clapham Common, this is not Glastonbury, this is not Nebworth or Hatfield House. This is a residential area. The park is surrounded by houses where people, families, young children live. And even just for one weekend, we should not have to suffer the noise, the antisocial behaviour, the criminality, the drug taking, the canisters that lie around after the event. I remember after the 2017 event being in Malden Town Centre with my son, and he was saying, "Oh, Daddy, look at these canisters. What are these?" And it was like they were everywhere. It's disgusting, and I just don't want this licence to be granted. I don't think there's many of us in this room who do, and it's just crazy. And basically, commercial or financial interests of the council should not trump the interests of the families and the children who live in this area. So please do not grant this licence. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Susan Liang and I'm a 61-year-old disabled resident who lives in Rosedene Avenue, which is off London Road and opposite Morden Park. Forgive me for appearing a little bit cynical, but I believe that it was always the intention of the applicant to achieve the compromise application. Asking initially for more than what you hope to achieve is a well-known negotiating tactic, often employed by trade unions. Whilst other residents are objecting on the grounds of noise disruption and other issues, I am focusing on the antisocial behaviour exhibited by some festival attendees on their way to and from the venue and in Morden Town Centre. I would like to object to this application using Merton Council's own 4 licensing objectives, as I believe that this application contravenes all of them: prevention of public nuisance, prevention of crime and disorder, protection of children from harm, and promotion of public safety. I am a member of St Lawrence Church in London Road. In 2017, at the first event held by this company for one day, we had major problems. Festival attendees urinated, defecated, vomited, and performed sexual acts in the churchyard, as well as taking illegal drugs, and leaving behind used condoms, nitrous oxide canisters, etc., for us to find the next day when we attended church. In 2018, as Claire and David have said, to prevent this, the churchyard was fenced in with metal barricades, as was the rectory and Manor House nursing home next door. Members of the church stewarded the churchyard for 14 hours on both the Saturday and Sunday. We not only kept the antisocial behaviour away from the churchyard, but also gave help, advice, directions, and 1,000 bottles of water to festival attendees. All that we actually achieved, however, was to move the antisocial behaviour across the road to the Hatfield Mead estate. Families living there were in virtual lockdown, unable to open their windows or allow their children to play outside. One man exposed his private parts to a 7-year-old child, and there was evident drug taking there. The applicants promised to address some of the issues. However, this was promised in 2017, and the event in 2018 was worse, so no lessons apparently were learnt then. At the 2018 event, reported numbers of crime increased, although lack of policing meant that many offences probably went unreported. Residents reported being unable to use their gardens or even open their windows on what was a very hot weekend. Children were unable to sleep, and some young families and elderly residents felt unsafe in their own homes. As blatant drug... Sorry?
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt you. Can you just give the lady your attention, please?
Yes, we're listening to her.
No, you're talking to each other. 5 minutes.
Thank you for interruption.
Can I go on? As blatant drug dealing, drunken and drug behaviour was taking place in residential streets. Local businesses in Morden suffered from shoplifting, aggressive behaviour and damage to toilets in cafes. How many temporary toilet facilities would be required to adequately serve up to 20,000 people? And how on earth do you ensure that they actually use them, as opposed to openly urinating and defecating in full view of others, including children, as happened? Alcohol and drug usage tends to remove inhibitions. Litter, which should have been cleared up promptly, was not sorted out for weeks, causing danger to children and animals. Staff at Morden Primary School, returning in September, found that they had to clear the playground of nitrous oxide canisters before they could allow the children into the school. Drunken and drugged festival attendees, and presumably rejects who weren't allowed in, also posed a risk to themselves and others by paying little or no attention to cars on the main road, London Road. I have had it suggested to me on social media that anyone who doesn't want to be disturbed by the festival should go away. Well, that seems to me to be a licence for burglars. To sum up, Morden is a densely populated residential area with a high concentration of families and elderly people living near to Morden Park. In my opinion, it is totally unsuitable for an event of this nature. Whilst I appreciate that the council does need to raise money and that we do need to hold events in the park, these should be more family friendly. In conclusion, in August 2018, the licensing committee rejected an application to hold a similar event hosted by Dynamic in September 2018. This company seemed to be on paper more responsible than the applicant and had better safeguards in place. However, the application was rejected on the basis of the experience of the two events held in 2017 and 2018 by Eastern Electric that had had such a negative impact on residents. I asked the committee to reject this application on the basis that it contravenes all 4 of Merton Council's own licensing objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julia Menold? Sorry. Pippa Maslin? Pippa, thank you.
Thanks. I've been to festivals, namely Glastonbury, Latitude, and I would say that from what I see of Eastern Electrics, they are seeking to emulate the, shall we say, liberal atmosphere of the festivals that I've named. As has been pointed out by many people, now there is a key difference between the location of those festivals and the proposed venue of Morden Park for Eastern Electrics. I would urge the applicants to make life easier for themselves and make their attendee experience better, sort of maximise the attendees' experience by taking their events to a more suitable venue. I don't want to begrudge Eastern Electric's fans of having a great time. I just am absolutely convinced that the park that's near me is not the right place.
Julia Menold? Nicola Moriarty, Mr. and Mrs. O'Keefe, Jamie Ray, Robert Redmond, John Rust, Elizabeth Sherwood. Right.
Good evening. I'm Liz Sherwood and I wrote a representation which I hope you've actually read. I'm not repeating what I put in my representation, and I know I won't get applause from what I'm about to say. My representation suggested that the event should not take place on a Friday, and the applicants have taken account of that. I've said that numbers should be limited to much less than 30,000 until the organisers can prove they are able to deal with some of the issues that a large event causes. I also suggested it should not be for 5 years, but perhaps 2 or 3, with a review from residents each year before allowing the following year events to be agreed. Although I'm secretary for the Friends of Morden Park, this is from my own perspective. I live on the London Road side of the park, and in the first year of the event, I could hear the music in my home, but I did not hear it in 2018. So I admit I am less affected by the music than residents who live closer to the park. In 2018, there were event attendees who came and parked in our CPZ and received parking tickets, but again the parking did not inconvenience me. There was litter left on our roads, which was cleared relatively quickly, perhaps faster than when we have to wait for our usual street cleaner, but he has a very large round. Living in Merton does mean we are fortunate in having many green spaces and parks on our doorsteps to enjoy, and certainly with Morden Park, feel we are out in the countryside. Each park has its own character from its history. Within a short walking distance of Morden Park are several parks and open spaces. Cannon Hill Common, King George's Playing Field, Morden Recreation Ground in Central Road, Ravensbury Park, Mostyn Gardens and Joseph Hood. I'd like to give you a few statistics. There are 116 sites or green spaces within Merton, with 2 more coming into use soon. Over 40 playgrounds, 6 paddling pools and 2 water play parks. These all come with costs attached. Just to keep the paddling pools open over the summer holidays cost about 100,000. It is great to see the paddling pool in Morden Park packed with families, including small children, as it was last summer and previous years. I am told that generations of children have enjoyed the paddling pool and have fond memories of it. Mums sit outside with their children in the sunshine and have picnics. They would not have the same experience in the new leisure centre, but we would hope migrate to it once the children are older. My argument here is that these wonderful parks require funding. I note that many of the people making a representation say they realise that local government has suffered from cuts, and parks in particular are non-statutory, so do not have funding protected. But no one has said where they think the funding should come from. As central government has decided not to fund parks, then the managers of them have to seek income from elsewhere. Thus, events like this one from We Are the Fair. As I've said in my representation, this one event brings a significant sum to benefit all Merton green spaces. We could, of course, have income-generating events in the park every weekend, but smaller events do not bring in the same income as this one large one. Our park would be even less enjoyable with many events each weekend. This is one event over 2 days. I appreciate what everyone has said about the inconvenience and nuisance, but I'm trying to look at the bigger picture. If councillors reject this application, you may regret it when some of the same residents who have made representations return to you in a year or two's time and say, why don't we have a paddling pool now? Why is our playground closed or ageing equipment not replaced? Why is our park or recreation ground locked? Why is the grass not cut so I can walk safely with my dog? Why is my local park unsafe for me and my family to use? It's been suggested to me that an army of volunteers could take over the running of parks. Well, our small team of volunteers regularly spend a couple of hours each Wednesday morning litter picking, but it would be a massive step for us to become skilled tractor drivers, cutting large areas of grass, or learning how to maintain the pitch and putt greens, and we might have a head for heights to put up bird boxes, but I doubt we'd be happy to swing from ropes up veteran trees when they need maintenance. These are jobs requiring skills and health and safety training. Thus, my plea to consider the wider picture of parks in Merton. It isn't Merton being bloody-minded about sweating their assets, including parks, in this financial climate, but every council is in the same position. Events are vital to the future of our parks. So I know you won't applaud, but thank you very much.
My fault, I should have followed my own advice, shouldn't I? Switch the microphone on. Christina Skritska, Chris Stanton, Patrick Walsh, Michelle Whittington, Richard and Angela Winson, Peter Jackson, Claire Geoffrey. Right. Well, that brings us to the end of the representations from interested parties. Sorry. Yes, I know. That's fine. And I'm now going to ask whether you wish, the applicant, whether you wish to make any responses to the comments made by the interested parties.
Mike. Microphone. Could I ask some questions, please, of Claire and David Heath-White, please? You've indicated that you feel that the organisers of Eastern Electric haven't kept promises, and you indicated that you had been promised a meeting.
Yes, we were told beforehand that we would be contacted by somebody to talk through the experience, given that the previous year had been so bad. And there were changes made this year. We were basically barricaded into our house and the church. And we expected some kind of comeback, given that there's a lot been said about kind of meetings with stakeholders. And I thought we were one of the primary... we were contactable by email. We were contactable by email throughout the time. We were away for a month in November, but
Yeah.
We were contactable by email, and nobody has contacted us.
That's just what I was going to ask you about. You see, because if we could all turn to the supplementary agenda, that's supplementary agenda 1, and page 12. There's a paragraph 9 of Rob Dudley's statement, which deals with dialogue with officers, residents and stakeholders. You'll see that there was a meeting with residents at item B on the
Sorry,
third...
can you give us the reference again, please?
Yes, of course. Supplementary Agenda 1, page 12. There's a residents' meeting on the 30th of October 2018 at item B. You can see the people who attended: John and Linda Kingsley and David and Elaine O'Keefe, whose name has just been read out. And then at item D on the 5th of November, another residents' meeting, this time with Elizabeth Sherwood, Elspeth Clark, from whom we've heard, and Dudley Sesford. And then on the 22nd of November 2018, a community engagement meeting. I think that you were specifically invited to that, were you not?
I think a couple of things, that given that others were specifically invited, we were told we would have a meeting individually, as we were particularly individually affected. The meeting in the college, which was the general meeting, we were away for. My husband had a sabbatical. We were away for that time. But I gather it was very, very busy. There were loads and loads of people. There's a list somewhere of all the people.
Yes, there were.
Said,
you can see from the entry there were 100 local
exactly,
residents.
yeah. And I think we would certainly come into the category, if I may continue, please.
Mrs. Heath-White.
Of the Kingsleys who live on the park, and also Elspeth and Elizabeth, who had particular concerns. We were told that those would be met, and they weren't. Thank you.
Forgive me, what I asked was, were you not invited to that meeting?
We knew about the general meeting. We were not invited to any other meeting. We had no other contact from anybody.
But why do you say then that they haven't kept a promise to hold a meeting?
No, not to hold a meeting. Hold a meeting with us, personally. We were told that we would have, and we were told that somebody would contact us after the event to talk through how it had been specifically for us, because there were very particular things put in place. We had a meeting before the event to talk about it, and there was a wedding on the Saturday and how that went. We were told that we would have a chance to talk about that.
But you were away. You say you were away. I think you were in the United States of America.
Yes.
On sabbatical in November.
Yes, but we weren't. Nobody emailed us. We knew about the meeting, but nobody emailed us personally in any way. Which is what.
Weren't you in email correspondence?
Yeah.
But not with the other
away.
fair.
We were around from the 6th of August through to the
16th of October.
16th of October.
And nobody was in touch.
Well, did you get in touch with them?
It's not our responsibility. Chair, this is a minor point, I think.
And we were told that we would be contacted.
No. Well, thank you very much.
I think it's a minor point, but I think it just, yeah. Have you found an email? Yes. Oh, well done. When was that?
It was on the 2nd of November, but we didn't know that you were...
But you didn't, we were receiving emails.
Well, let's not have...
inviting us to the general meeting.
This is not the right time.
An email was sent, but they were already away.
Right.
On the 2nd of November. It was a long time later. Okay, we weren't aware of that.
I think the representation is made.
On. Do you have any other questions of any other interested party? No, thank you. Right. Can I ask police or the licensing officer or the environmental health wish to ask any questions of any of the interested parties' representations? No? No. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my colleagues whether they wish to ask any questions. You've got one, Aidan.
One or two. So just to the authority, the police and environmental health, following on from Peter's point about the leisure centre, how has that been factored into this? I haven't seen a mention of the leisure centre in terms of visitation, its operating hours, do better know about the event planned. How has this been put into your plan? You want to start with the police?
I'm so sorry, could you repeat that, please?
So, the leisure centre in the park. I myself visit it with my son on the weekend because it's the best place you can go to for swimming at the minute. So how would you, in the plans here, I haven't seen a specific mention, how would you manage the separation of traffic between the customers of that centre and those who are attending the event, and what specific plans do you want to put in place? It can be a generality now, but it's just what are your thoughts on that?
That would all fall within the traffic management plan that would need to be agreed with us well in advance. It'll be produced to us if the conditions, if this licence is granted and with the conditions that are being offered up in place, then a traffic management plan will be part of the presentation that will be given to us, and we will have the opportunity to approve that. There is one sticking point on that, and that is in relation to actual road closures or lane closures. It was the situation last year was the lane closure was put in as an emergency thing. It wasn't planned prior to that because I understand it was difficult to get an actual order in place. We would like to push the applicant to have a proper traffic order in place so that we can have that lane closed, but that would have to form part of the traffic management plan that would be agreed with us in advance of the event.
Cool, thank you. Same for the Authority on Environmental Health. Anything to add to that?
Nothing. We've nothing really tried, but if we needed to get involved in any discussions, then obviously we're more than happy to do that.
And the Authority?
Right to say the traffic management plan is where that detail would reside.
Cool. Okay, that's there. So, just picking up on Sean's point, could I suggest a slight amendment to page 25, on the prevention of public nuisance? On the main document, can I suggest an amendment, or could I call on you to bring forward an amendment potentially? Just a way to work with colleagues from customer services to make sure that there's no repetition of the previous year.
I think the way you would deal with that is you would impose a condition that you would choose to impose if you are minded to grant the licence.
No, thank you. I was just wondering if it can come from the applicant or a general commitment of doing that rather than, and then we can talk about specifics if we were to grant the...
I'm sure that we could, with assistance, come to a form of words, indeed.
Cool. Thank you.
Could I just pick up on the matter that you raised before, which is traffic?
Yes, please.
The position is that the first point of call in relation to traffic management is, in fact, Transport for London, so TfL. So a provisional traffic management plan has already been submitted to TfL, and as soon as it is approved by them, of course it will also need to go to the Metropolitan Police as well. But the first port of call, I'm informed, is always TfL, and we're awaiting the response from TfL at the moment.
Cool. All right, so I'm just going to recap from all the questions I've asked this evening, yourselves and others. So in terms of noise, there's a commitment to look at how you would test that and look with partners to make sure that, you know, the procedures that you've got in place for the weekend will actually work ahead of the event. We've already talked about staff access in terms of monitoring from the authority's point of view. And we've already talked about the issue with the low frequency and the commitment there to reduce that using the new techniques and the continual community monitoring there. So, and then in terms of the security, so on the egress, the people even will be escorted. You know, it'll be heavily staffed in terms of people walking back and forth. There'll be wraparound using data from last year in terms of making sure that there isn't, you know, something at 2 o'clock in the morning that people need to respond to. There'll be no petting in the pool. And your security staff will, internally will respond to any incidents in relation to reassure the colleagues at Metropolitan Police. You are going to be looking into the second fence based on financial viability. Yeah. And in terms of the railway stations and Uber, you will heavily staff that to avoid any. Yeah, and at the same time, look at what you would do with railway stations in terms of the staff in there, fixed staff in there. Okay, and from the conversations we've had, it seems that it's about an hour or so to evacuate the park. Is that correct?
Yeah. So once sort of peak egress is underway, it's about an hour until everybody's off-site, and then as you've obviously alluded to, there's an element of some people still being in the vicinity, but yeah, it's an hour.
And yeah, and you'll work to that. We've got the traffic order coming in beforehand, and appropriate staffing levels in terms of flex and accounting for holidays, sickness, random things like that. And in following up from representations from the audience, you'll have the contracts will have clearly stated that there'll be rest facilities for staff, and that there'll be sufficient flex also again in terms of the staff. We talked about that already. And in terms of the littering, you said that you would look to have a multi-sweep option where those leaving you would follow up afterwards behind them and then continually sweep to an appropriate hour in the morning to capture all the things like that, all the bottles and other things that were raised by residents. Is that accurate, what you've committed to in terms of the policies that you'll be drafting up with colleagues?
Yeah, I think you've summarised that accurately.
Okay. All right. Is there anything that I've missed that the Authority of Environmental Health and Metropolitan Police would like to dig further into? Cool. And one final question. I just wondered, has today been helpful in terms of being a subcommittee and a level of scrutiny and the ability to listen to the audience and tweak and amend the proposal as you have today?
Could you repeat that?
Has it been helpful to be here to amend the process, to update as it's gone? Do you value the process of being of a subcommittee?
Very much so.
Would you see if fit then having to repeating this exercise potentially next year if we did grant you a licence?
Now, you shouldn't be asking me, of course, because I have a financial interest in that. The answer is that, can I address you on that in closing? Because obviously the length of the licence is an important factor. I think that I may be a little bit too long just at the moment. Could I explain our position in relation to that in closing?
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Right, I think we've got to the point where I'm going to I can ask the licensing officer for any comments or clarifications needed.
I don't think I've got anything else to add, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our legal advisor the same question.
I'm not going to give you legal advice right now because I don't know what the questions are. I will be giving you legal advice when we do deliberations, when that will be.
Thank you. So we come to the point where I'm going to ask the responsible authorities as to whether they wish to make closing statements. I'll start with the police.
My only closing statement is that we have discussed this event on numerous occasions between us and the organisers. We've come to a situation now where control measures have been offered that the Metropolitan Police believe that this is the best that we can achieve for this event. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Yes, we've had in-depth discussion with the applicant with regards to noise levels, and they have met our requirements and satisfied that their noise management plan is a suitable and workable document.
We come to a closing statement from the applicant.
Can I start by saying?
Can you start by putting your
microphone on? Can I start by saying that both I and the applicants for this premises licence understand completely the disturbance that an event of this kind will inevitably be caused to the residents surrounding Morden Park. I have lived close to Clapham Common for over 40 years, and so I know about these things. What I do want to insist upon is this. However strongly views might be held, and as I say, I can understand why views are so strongly held, what has not occurred in this case is that this applicant has ever broken a promise. This applicant has never been in breach of any license condition. No one, not even a single one of the responsible authorities, has ever doubted the applicant's integrity. Indeed, the view of the responsible authorities, and I include the licensing authority, the Metropolitan Police, and indeed the Environmental Health Department, have congratulated the applicant on his attitude of cooperation and conferral with them. And I know that I just referred to it just now, but we can see on that page 12 of the first supplementary agenda of the dialogue which has been taking place between the organisers of Eastern Electrics and both the responsible officers, the residents and the stakeholders. There is no objection to this license application from any of the responsible authorities. That is the position. Can I now address the principal matters that have been raised, not only, of course, by the responsible authorities, but also by the local residents and indeed by the licensing subcommittee itself? Can I start first of all with numbers? The original application was for 30,000 persons on the Saturday. The reason why there is an application, or was an application, for 30,000 persons is of course based upon economic considerations. But remember also, please, that it is also a reflection of the demand for this festival. If there are to be, or were to be, it's not going to be now because it's been cut back to 23,500, but if there were to be a license for 30,000 persons, the only reason why it would be successful at that level is because there would be 30,000 persons or more who wanted to come to this Eastern Electrics Festival. So when speaking in terms of the residents, of course the residents' interests must be protected. And there must not be unreasonable nuisance or disturbance caused to residents. Could I ask the committee also to consider those persons who come to these affairs? Now, that original figure of 30,000 persons has, as you know, been cut back to 23,500. I reject completely the suggestion that somehow there's been some sort of bargaining tactic employed in this case. It may be that some here do not understand so well the process of licensing. It is constantly the hope of successful businesses, and particularly successful licensed premises or events, to wish to meet the demand for their event or their premises. So it is completely unsurprising that the applicants here should have wanted in the first place a number as high as 30,000. But the point about these applicants is that once they put forward the proposal for 30,000 persons, when responsible authorities and indeed the residents say, no, that's too much, they are willing to compromise. They accept the strength of feeling about it, and in particular the advice of the responsible authorities, and they reduce what they ask for, and eventually, and this is surely how the system should work, is it not, come to an agreement with the responsible authorities in particular. And that is why I can say this figure of 23,500 for 2019 and 27,000 for 2020, can I emphasize, this is the figure that has been agreed by the responsible authorities. It is not as great as the applicant would have wished, but it is agreed now by the persons who are the very persons who are responsible for deciding what advice should be given to the licensing subcommittee. And that is why I ask you to grant this license in those capacity numbers. It isn't a question of just numbers. I do appreciate Councillor Kohler's argument in relation to the correlation between the increase in number between 2017 and 2018 and the increase in behaviour. But we believe that that was caused by other factors, including insufficient conditioning of the licence. There was no breach, but it's clear, is it not, from the fact that we now have, how many is it? 66 additional conditions that are being put forward onto this licence. That the conditioning last year for 2018 was insufficient. Can I turn then to the period of the licence, as I said to Councillor Mundy I would. Originally, the application was for a permanent licence. There's a very simple reason for that. The fee for a permanent licence is a great deal less than individual one-year licenses. It also costs the organisers and the applicants a good deal of money to have people like me come along and make the application each year. So the basic premise behind the application for a permanent licence is a purely economic one. Again, however, what has happened is that the responsible authorities, and in the light of the objections from the residents, the applicant has modified that application. Even today, we were still asking, as you will have seen from Rob Dudley's statement in Supplementary Agenda 2, was asking for 3 years. So it's only been this afternoon, or even this evening, that the agreement has been reached between the applicant and the responsible authorities that the figure should be for 2 years. So, again, that is an agreement that has been reached with the very people, the very responsible authorities, who are charged with providing advice to this committee as to what is a reasonable and appropriate period for this licence. So again, I would ask the committee not to cut back the licence to, say, 1 year. The compromises have already taken place, and the advice that you have and the application that you have is for a licence for 2 years. And I say the same, as I probably already have done, about the capacity numbers as well. The same applies. Then turning to the problems and the difficulties that certainly took place in 2018, and what is it now that we are able to say? Well, I went through this to some degree in my opening, and I'm not going to repeat it now. We know that there is one thing that can be said, and I'm going to say this because it has been raised by some of the residents in their representations. This is not a music festival that suffers from a drug problem. Of course, there is the use of drugs. There is the problem of nitrous oxide canisters. There are these problems. But my goodness, of all there was talk earlier of Glastonbury, there is nothing like that could be compared to the problems that many music festivals suffer from, and that is of drug abuse and indeed drug supply and distribution. You will note that other than the reference to nitrous oxide, I'll say a bit about this in just a moment, the representation, and indeed any of the representations from the Metropolitan Police, who of course are most closely concerned with drugs and drug abuse. There is no concern on the part of Russ Stevens and the Metropolitan Police in relation to this musical event, this musical festival, in relation to drugs. But there have been these problems with the areas that I identified at the beginning: noise, security, litter, and sanitation. Can I start with noise? The position is that the limit on the decibel level for the festival, for the event for 2019, is 5 decibels lower than that for 2018. Can I just give the committee, and indeed anybody else, just some idea of what a target figure of 65 decibels with a maximum noise limit of 70 decibels, average over 15 minutes, actually means? If we go to page 21 of the second supplementary agenda, and this is Appendix 2 to Andrew Pickup's memorandum, there is a noise comparison chart. We can see that the level of 60 to 70 decibels, sound levels in decibels A, it is headed, is the sound of conversational speech. And the noise range between 70 and 80 decibels is the average traffic on a street corner. Now, in exactly the same way as where you get the average traffic on a street corner, you can have a period where the lights are red and there's no traffic moving at all. Equally, you can have a police car go past and the decibel levels obviously madly fluctuate from one end to the other. So it is with a music festival, which is why the music levels or noise levels are generally set as average noise levels over a 15-minute period, and that is the LAEQ figure. Now, in this case, for 2019, we can see what the proposals are because they are in the noise management report, and that is at page 14 of the same second supplementary agenda. Also attached to Andrew's memorandum. And if we look on page 14, and in particular to paragraph 7 on that page, it states this: the control limit set on site shall ensure that a target music noise level, MNL, of 65 decibels, that's LAEQ, over 15 minutes, measured at the monitoring location shall be achieved. Where the target MNL of 65 decibels LAEQ 15 minutes is exceeded, then suitable and appropriate action shall be taken to meet this target level. So, if a police car goes past, within the next 15 minutes, you're going to need to turn the traffic lights to red, if I haven't extended that analogy a little bit too far. If you understand. If you go above the average at the early part of the the 15 minutes, then you have to balance it at the end of the 15 minutes. It then goes on to say an absolute MNL of 70 decibels LAEQ 15 minutes measured at the monitoring location shall not be exceeded. Now, that figure of 70 is indeed 5 decibels higher than the figure which Andrew Pickup, the environmental health, originally suggested in his representations of the 5th of December. And it's in his memorandum here that he speaks about, in summary, the plan largely incorporates the conditions outlined in my initial representations, but allows some slight flexibility on noise levels given the reduced event duration. And the thinking behind that is simply this. When you're talking about noise nuisance, it obviously depends upon how long that noise nuisance carries on for. So if the noise nuisance carries on for 3 days, it is a great deal more of a nuisance and a disturbance than if it carries on for 2 days. And as the application has been cut down from 3 days from 2 days, that means there is less noise nuisance or disturbance, and that allows some flexibility, which allowed for, although the target remains at 65 decibels, for a maximum level of 70 decibels. And that, I would suggest, is all that Andrew Pickup was intending to convey in his memorandum of whatever date it was, recently. What is very important to remember, however, that the maximum level is 5 decibels lower than it was last year, and the target level is 10 decibels lower than last year's event. Equally, I can also say this, as you can see from Rob Dudley's statement, there is an understanding of what went wrong last year. Although the license conditions were entirely complied with, in many ways, that was the problem. Too much concentration was spent upon making sure that the actual levels set by the licensing conditions were complied with, and the bigger picture was missed. For instance, that there was a great deal of bass coming out from the rear of this particular system, and also that there was, it's described, is it not, in Rob Dudley's statement. So we not only have a situation where there is an understanding of what went wrong last year, we have the fact that there has been no breach of the conditions. We now know that we need to have more conditions. More conditions are going to be imposed, and the situation is therefore quite different to the one which was occurring in August of 2018. And the committee can be satisfied. And what is more, it is being advised by its own responsible authorities that it can be satisfied, by the Council's own environmental health officer, senior environmental health officer Andrew Pickup, that it can be satisfied that nuisance to the residents around Morden Park can be kept to a minimum. Security. Clearly, experience has shown that there needed to be a more comprehensive plan for the security arrangements. That is why the event security management plan has been updated. It has now reached the stage of, insofar as it's not completed yet, a matter of agreement between, in particular, the Metropolitan Police, who are principally responsible for the authority principally concerned with security, The major difference between this year and last year is that the interior and exterior security arrangements are being separated, so there's no question of one side, as it were, of the fence blaming the other, and the two responsibilities are quite separate. There has been a great deal of conversation, and I can refer you back to the meetings between the organisers, the applicants, and the stakeholders. The stakeholders, of course, include the Safety Advisory Group, which is the advisory group which deals with, for instance, such matters as security. The responsible authorities are satisfied that the security arrangements in place for the 2019 festival are complete. And that is the advice that the licensing subcommittee has received. I would ask the licensing subcommittee to accept that advice, along with the numerous additional conditions designed to ensure the security of the 2019 event. Very much the same can be said in relation to litter and sanitation. Of course, we are all disgusted by persons urinating, and it doesn't matter whether they're male or female, in the street. How it could be that someone thinks it's better to urinate in the street than go into a rather dirty toilet, I don't know. But there it is. People do it. And the only thing that can be done to ensure that it is kept at a minimum is to make sure that the litter and sanitation arrangements are increased in order to meet with the demand. And that is why, again, the litter and sanitation arrangements have been doubled in the sense that there is now two companies, one for interior and one for exterior. I was amused to hear from Liz Sherwood that she thought that in fact the litter collection in her street had been somewhat better than the council's normal litter collection. But there it is. There is an improvement in this area. Those are all the areas which really cause concern and have caused concern and are the major part of the residents' representations. I cannot emphasize too much that these are now matters of agreement with the responsible authorities. And I would ask the licensing subcommittee to accept the advice of those responsible authorities. Can I say something about the pool? We propose that the question of the pool should be remitted to the Safety Advisory Group. Either that or the Public Health Department of this council. There was, I'm informed, some correspondence between the Public Health Department of Burton Borough Council in relation to the 2017 event, and so there has been contact in the past. I am going to propose that there should be a condition that the pool can be operated so long as it is conditioned in accordance with the recommendations of either the Safety Advisory Group or the Public Health Department of this council. And I was grateful to Russ Stevens for saying that if that was done, he would be happy. That would take a weight off his mind.
I would have thought it would be better to be the Safety Advisory Group rather than just Public Health.
Yes. Thank you. I will take that advice. Thank you. The Rob Dudley, his firm is called, his company is called We Are the Fair, as you know. The applicants are Blue Fox Events. This is being done in combination between the two companies. that these companies have extensive experience and knowledge in relation to music festivals. You can tell that from Rob Dudley's knowledge and experience himself. I hope that you have been impressed by his knowledge and experience, and most importantly of all, it must be to his credit, must it not, that from an application which attracted quite so many objections and representations back in November and December last year, that we have reached the stage where the responsible authorities are congratulating him on his cooperation and conferral with them, which has led to the agreement between us. As I said right at the beginning, there is always going to be disturbance caused by musical events, and indeed almost any other event, including football matches, cricket matches, indeed even the fireworks display, which also takes place, as you know, in Morden Park every year. I've already spoken about the demand for this event. Upwards of 38,500 persons are expected to be attracted and to have demand for this event. There are, amongst the very many letters of objection from local residents, some letters of support. I've already referred you to the letter from the care home. I understand that the care home is in fact situated very closely to the church. It's interesting to see the quite extraordinary differences between the two representations from the two places. There is no doubt that there is a considerable benefit to the London Borough of Merton and to the people of Merton by this event taking place in Merton. The website, the council website, refers to the beauty of Morden Park and its suitability for outdoor, large-scale outdoor events just such as this. There are considerable benefits to this event taking place in the London Borough of Merton. And that's not only the benefit that it brings to the people who come to Merton, but also to the borough and its residents as well. And we hope that all the things that we have done, all the things, I say we, again, the royal we, all the things that the applicant has done in conjunction with the responsible authorities, will ensure that the disturbance, the inevitable disturbance to the local residents will be kept to a minimum. And I ask you to accept that that will be so.
Thank you very much indeed for that closing submission. We've now come to the point where this licensing panel will now retire to, obviously, Susan.
Sorry, could we not have closing statements by the interested parties?
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chair.
Thank you very much for that gentle reminder.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. I think we've had actually that we went through that section.
We did go through that
prior to the closing statement by the applicant.
Yeah.
We've actually gone through that element of the agenda. I'm so sorry, but we have actually dealt with that. The very last submission is always made by the applicant.
Indeed, normally the applicant would go last, the opportunity to respond to everybody. Are you saying you're the only person who wants to speak now?
Probably, yes.
In which case, do you want to respond to anything she wants to say? Or are you going to stick to...
The lady did have an opportunity to make any representations that she wished to. that was the opportunity that she was given.
I
But,
was not given, no.
We don't know about this sort of thing. It's big bullying of small people. We don't have legal representation or know how to proceed.
Well, the committee's here to deal with bullying issues, in which case I think the committee has to make a decision as to whether they're going to hear this lady in terms of what something else she wants to say. That's what I thought you already dealt with.
Personally, I thought I had, but
I don't
if
think
we
we did.
are going, I'm minded to say that. Pardon? Yes, yeah. The procedures that we've always followed is that the applicant has the last observation to make. To be perfectly honest, I think most everybody who wanted to speak, and I did ask earlier on if anybody else wished to speak at that point, and no hands came up.
I understand,
no interest.
Chair, I might have been at
I'm
the
sorry,
toilet.
but whether we were
Understand, Chair.
outside or not
All
is not my problem. So I'm afraid that I'm going to rule that the applicant has the final comment and close this particular hearing. Thank you very much indeed for your understanding, for which I'm most grateful. So we are now going to move to closed session, which means that my colleagues and I, together with our legal advisor and clerk, will depart to consider this application and our judgment upon it. I am minded to suggest that in this particular instance that we have a deferred judgment and that
have time to consider it rather than being at 11 o'clock already.
yeah, rather than trying to rush things.
Obviously, you have a time scale into which you have to get. Sorry.
Yes.
Obviously, you have a time scale in which you have to get your decision out and written, which obviously we would have to comply with. But that's very possible.
I mean, we have up to 5 days to give that, and we would comply with that. But I say, therefore, this licensing panel is now concluded as far as the public session is concerned.
I think technically we would say it's postponed.
Or postponed.
Well, no, postponed is the word that is used, I believe, in the Harper case, if I remember rightly. And so, therefore, it's postponed until the decision is made and the decision is sent out.
How do we get made aware of the decision if we're not going to get made aware?
Well, there are two ways. If you've made a representation, you will be receiving a letter. If, on the other hand, you haven't, the decision will be placed on the council's website, which you will be able to see. I don't doubt that other people will tell you when that comes out, but suffice it to say it will be within 5 days. Say 5 working days.
5 working days is absolutely correct. And Amy, you've got all the addresses of all the people who've made representations, and you can guarantee that they will all be contacted with the decision. So on that basis, I'm satisfied, and that we will now postpone the decision publicly. Thank you all very much for your time.